Well, I would say I'm lucky, but I've also put in a lot of work that recently my intrusive thoughts have been a lot fewer. I still have them every day, but I don't see as much. I don't put as much meaning into them. I still had kind of obsessive cycles throughout middle school and high school, but then in college it got really bad because I had actually been through a sexual assault when I was 17, and I hadn't really come to terms with it until I was a freshman in college when I was 18. I had Googled, is it possible to get PTSD from reading an article? Because I didn't know how to describe what happened to me.
Hmm.
Like the fact I could pinpoint that the article was what caused a bunch of intrusive thoughts. So people with OCD, they call it the doubt disorder because you're always doubting everything. You're always seeking certainty. You're seeking reassurance a lot. Seeking reassurance is actually a compulsion. Like if you think you're a bad person, you might just keep asking your friends and family, do you think I'm a bad person? Do you think I would ever do that? And then it's kind of like to try to subside your anxiety.
Yeah, so like you're in a relationship with an understanding boyfriend. Should he react normally to your intrusive thoughts? Of like, so like one of the intrusive thoughts you have is that you think you might be gay. What is a good response to react to you that you're thinking that you might be gay, for example?
Well, I'll tell you what's not. You start to question everything about yourself because the core of it is that you're having an ego dystonic thought, which just means that you're having a thought that is not aligned with who you thought you were as a person, your identity and your values and your desires.
So you explain your OCD downward spiral as in you're in a hallway, then you're opening a door and there's no floor, so you're falling endlessly. So the question is, how do you stop falling?
And I remember just actively trying to commit to the idea that I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I don't want to be in this cycle of OCD anymore. I want to be in control of my life and my thoughts and my mental health, and I am not going to engage with this rumination. There's relationship OCD, there's sexual orientation OCD, harm OCD, pedophilia OCD, which just, it's probably the most controversial one.
Yeah,
Um,
I didn't know that was OCD.
yeah, so really, I want to I really don't want to misconstrue it because it's so misunderstood, and this is the reason why people with this type of OCD never talk about it.
So are you saying pedophilia OCD is a common theme in OCD patients?
Yeah, it's extremely common. It's an extremely common subtype
What?
because OCD hangs on to stigma a lot and what's right and what's wrong. It hangs on to morality as a foundation a lot of the time. And usually people with OCD just tend to care about morality like a lot.
Hello, welcome to my podcast, Two Mics, One Joe Stooch. I am Joe Stooch, and I'll be giving a mic to Erica. Erica is a mental health advocate with Puro, which is an internal form of OCD. She experiences constant intrusive thoughts. She is also a piano teacher and powerlifter. She's also a fellow podcaster called with a show called Just Say Maybe. A regular person may see the name Just Say Maybe as a title, but has a much deeper meaning in the OCD world. Let's expand on that.
Yeah, so when you kind of go through OCD treatment, the gold standard for OCD is exposure and response prevention therapy, ERP. A lot of it is about sitting in anxiety and sitting in the maybe and accepting that whatever thing that you think your intrusive thought or your obsession means about you is potentially true, which it sounds kind of rational and normal to say that, but when you have OCD and you're really deep in obsessions and self-judgment, it's really hard to even to start with that, to just acknowledge that that's a possibility. It sounds very vague and everything, but it's basically just about accepting uncertainty and being able to recognize anxiety and yeah, accepting it as a way of life, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's like one of those things where you can explain it, even like the best person in the world, but nah, it's there's so much you can explain for someone to truly understand because a regular person would be like, just stop thinking about it or it's not gonna happen. And you're like,
Yeah.
that's not how it works. It's deeper. It's like log, it like messes up your day, I would assume, right?
Yeah, I'm lucky that Well, I would say I'm lucky, but I've also put in a lot of work that recently my intrusive thoughts have been a lot fewer. Still have them every day, but I don't see as much. I don't put as much meaning into them. But what happens usually is you start to put a lot of meaning into, let's say, I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming you don't have OCD, Joe, right?
I do
So,
not know.
yeah. So it's kind of, I mean, you've probably had an intrusive thought before where, I don't know, you just imagine something really terrible happening in your head. Like it just comes out of nowhere.
I
Um,
mean, I know it's like natural to say like, let's say you're like cutting strawberries and you're like, oh, I have this knife and I could it kill my whole family.
yeah,
Like that's
exactly.
it's a normal thought for all people. Some people are like, oh my god, but it's a normal thought. It's just everyone has bad thought, but it's more of do you act on it or not, or how much it really affects you. Is
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think some, people with this type of OCD usually, and it depends on your theme of OCD, but you have an intrusive thought and then you think it means something about you. And you can recognize that everyone has intrusive thoughts and you can know that fact and you can know that you're probably being irrational by giving it meaning, but at the same time that 1% chance that you're not being irrational is the thing that sticks. And like you said, it's like everyone could just probably, who doesn't understand, probably would just be like, yeah, just let it go
Mhm.
and that's it. But someone with OCD, just sticks. It's sticky. I don't know why.
Yeah, they kind of let the audience know that I do not want to kill my family. Sometimes I do, but
Yeah,
uh,
exactly.
if you see me on the news, do not watch this interview.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I know that you had six therapists in your life, so why so many? Like, did they not understand you, or the vibe was
Yeah,
wrong, or what?
that's a good question. So I first started experiencing OCD symptoms when I was 11 or 12, and at the time I didn't know what OCD really was. I only knew it as like the compulsive hand washing and cleaning. So I
Mm-hmm.
really myself I didn't even know what that meant. I just knew that I was having really disturbing graphic thoughts in my head and I hated them and I hated myself for having them because I didn't want them and it disgusted me, but then I
Is
just didn't
that
know what to do with it.
are you a special case in terms of recognizing it? Because some people are like you seem like a really nice person, but like some people are not nice people, and like could they just accept their thoughts as is, and like
Yeah.
you're like it seemed like you were aware enough that your thoughts were improper to do something about it.
I think that that actually is probably what qualifies it as OCD is you I've read this comparison between OCD and OCPD before, which is obsessive compulsive personality disorder, which is a whole different thing. And I'm not as well versed in all of that terminology. But
Mm.
essentially, the difference that I saw when I was reading the two side by side is that OCD people with OCD recognize that their thoughts are irrational, like I would say probably 99%. I mean, this is a totally random statistic, but most people with OCD know that their thoughts are completely irrational.
Really, that's pretty
Yeah.
surprising, actually.
Yeah, but it doesn't help. That's the tricky part, right? Like it doesn't help because it causes so much anxiety and you have so much urgency to figure out what the actual true answer is. And it's almost like you feel like if you don't figure it out right now, then you're gonna ruin your life. You're gonna be the thing that you think that you are,
I
and you
mean,
end up just getting stuck there.
the awareness of you, especially at 11, is really, really good. Then,
Well, I was aware, but I didn't know what was happening. So it wasn't like I wasn't aware that performing compulsions was a thing that fueled the OCD cycle. So I still performed compulsions, like internal compulsions, and I thought it was helping me, but it didn't help me figure anything out. So it kind of, I still had kind of obsessive cycles throughout middle school and high school, but then in college, it got really bad because I had actually been through a sexual assault when I was 17, and I hadn't really come to terms with it until I was a freshman in college when I was 18. So I remember it was because it was during Sexual Assault Awareness Week or something like that in college. And I remember reading every single criteria about what qualified as sexual assault because I had written it off in my head as just a drunken night or something like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
like a party, and it was just, oh, it's just a thing that happened. But then the more I read about it, the more I realized, you know, it was not consensual. I was in a vulnerable state where I was powerless and weak and did not, and really drunk, and that everything that happened to me was actually a sexual assault, regardless of how I felt about it at the time. And I remember coming to terms with that and just feeling really heavy about it. And I think that caused me to have a hyper awareness of anything sex related, whether it meant like genitals, just like other people's, mine, anyone, just like in general, it just was at the forefront of my mind. And I think along with the assault, it kind of made me think about harm a lot. And so this is my theory, right? Like, I think OCD and trauma can be very interrelated. So I remember I was working in the physics building as I don't remember, as an administrative assistant or something like that. And I remember seeing the sharp end of a tape dispenser, and I just remember it cutting me specifically down there. And I was just super disturbed by it. And I'm like, well, that's just weird. But then, the next time I saw any kind of sharp object, I just thought about the same thing happening to me, especially in my genitals. So it was not fun. And I think it really caused me a lot of distress because it was almost both an obsession and a compulsion at the same time, because it was like I had to check in my head whether or not this harmful object could hurt me in my private areas, so that, and I'm using all these terms because I want to stay a little bit more, I guess, like PG about it. I know I could probably talk a little bit more explicitly about it, but I still want to make it digestible for people to understand.
You can talk whatever you like. I don't have a filter here.
Yeah, just for my own personal reasons.
Yeah.
But it was really, it just caused me a lot of distress. And then, later on that summer, I had another obsession come on, which was I was reading an article about, I just, one of those Facebook articles that popped up. Someone had reposted it, and the article was describing this man doing something really horrible to his child. He had sexually assaulted his child. And I remember thinking that was horrifying. I had an image in my head of it happening. And then that day forward, I just saw that happening everywhere. Like, in my head, I just was walking on the street. I would see a kid and I would imagine the same thing happening to them. And I was so so distressed. I was so upset and disgusted and horrified that it was almost like I couldn't, because I hated the thought so much, like I would see it everywhere. And that's kind of the thing about OCD, is like, if you do thought suppression, then it's going to come back up, right? Like, if you are trying so hard not to think about something, then you're going to think about it. And I think for me, I wanted to not think about it so much that it just kept coming up. And to kind of relate it back to the whole awareness of me being sexually assaulted, and I guess I should just say raped, I think it's because I was so aware of all these factors that go into a sexual assault that I was hyper aware of anything related to it. So those intrusive thoughts were just rampant all the time for months. And eventually, usually I had this kind of cycle where it would happen mostly in the summer when I didn't have a lot to do. And then when school started again, it would die down, but it would still happen every once in a while, and I would still kind of freak out about it. But go back to your previous question about why I had 6 therapists is the first one I went to, I remember I just came in there, just crying. I was like, oh my God, I'm so depressed and anxious. And I think it's because I had Googled, is it possible to get PTSD from reading an article? Because I didn't know how to describe what happened to me. Mm-hmm. Like, the fact I could pinpoint that the article was what caused a bunch of intrusive thoughts.
Wait, this at 11 years old, or this?
No, this was in college. This was in college. Okay. This was this was after during freshman year of college, after I had come to terms with the sexual assault that happened to me when I was 17. So I guess this was actually last year of college. So when I was 21, I finally went to my first therapist, and I was describing to her that I had figured out but I had thought maybe I have pure O. I looked up something on Google that, maybe I have pure O because I had Googled, what can you get PTSD from an article? And then Google was like, no. But then eventually I dug deeper, and then something about intrusive thoughts came up, and then it said this is the type of OCD. And I remember being like, oh my God, this sounds like me. So I took it to the therapist, and she was like, you could probably spend your time more wisely and not on the internet and, self-diagnosing.
Dang.
And
Okay.
I was like, okay. And then I was like telling her about, I mean, I don't know if I don't think you've been to therapy. I think we talked about this.
Yeah, I haven't been. No.
But the first session is an intake session, and they ask you basically why why you want to do therapy and everything that's happened
Yeah.
to you up to that point.
Well,
And
I
so I'm
know.
just,
Yeah, I know for insurance reason they need like a reason why like you're in there for. Like, can't just like say, "Oh, she's here." But they have to give you like some, even if it's a pre-diagnosis, they have to give you. They have to say something.
yeah, yeah. So it was kind of extensive, I guess. So she would ask me like, have you done drugs? Have you done alcohol?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. Do you abuse substances and all this stuff?
Yeah.
And I was rambly because I was so distressed. And I ended up
Yeah.
telling her that I think that all this pure O stuff, all this, or I was like, all these intrusive thoughts started happening even more after I realized that the sexual assault happened. But I think I was definitely less articulate than that. And she ended up, writing in her notes, I saw that she said I had loose behavior. And
Okay.
and I'm like, I literally just described to you that I was raped and you're calling me loose. Like, that is so slut shamey.
Yeah.
I was like, why would, and I remember telling her that
It
outright. And
it's
she,
unprofessional.
yeah, and she was like, oh, like she like didn't realize that what I was saying was sexual assault, because I had described it to her as I was so drunk that I couldn't even function. Like I was barely conscious. But she took it as reckless and loose behavior.
Oh my
Um,
god.
so I decided to no longer go to her. And then
Good.
my second,
Good for
yeah,
you with that. Yeah.
yeah,
A lot would just not even go back, or like they wouldn't even pursue to see another therapist. They would just assume all therapists are bad, and it's like you're gonna suffer alone. So good on you for continuing to
yeah,
find answers and relief.
yeah, yeah. I was really upset, but I thought, the desire for me to get better trumped the I guess bad experience. I wanted to still try for another one. So I did, and the second therapist, she was a lot more validating, a lot more empathetic. But when it came time to pay, I didn't know how therapy worked at the time, and I didn't know how insurance worked because I was 21. I just didn't
Yeah.
understand those things. I was still on my mom's insurance, and my mom was paying, and then the therapist says it's 100. No, she said it's. I think she said it was $200, and my mom was like, "It's $200 for an hour," and the therapist is like, "Yeah." And then she pulls out this program, a 6-month program that I think the package was, I think it was probably like $6,000, $8,000. Guaranteed you're going to feel better. Guaranteed your trauma will be healed within
Uh,
6 months.
wow. Okay,
Um,
I gotta get on that.
I know. Or your money back. And I was like, this is so weird. It's so gimmicky.
Yeah.
I didn't like that it was so gimmicky. And I remember pushing it to my mom a little bit, and then realizing myself, like, I don't think I
Yeah.
want, that's so subjective if your trauma is healed or not. That doesn't make any sense.
But
How
not
can
even
you?
that. But 6 months. Most people take years to like get somewhere. But 6 months. My God.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know. I decided not to go to her anymore. And then it would be another year and a half, 2 years for me to look for another therapist. The next one was nice, but I felt like I kind of felt that she was trying to impose certain cultural stereotypes onto me. I'm Chinese American. I don't really particularly like when therapists make assumptions about my culture. And it wasn't like she was trying to be malicious or anything. I just didn't really like the way that she was framing things.
I mean, even your nationality kind of had nothing to do with anything either. Like it's not even an important part to bring up.
Well, it is. I do think it's important, but I don't like when people say things like, "Oh, I know in Asian cultures that respecting your elders is really important," and I'm
Mm,
like, "Isn't it important in any culture to respect your el?" I mean, like, I think it's like they're trying to be culturally aware, but to
mm-hmm.
me, it wasn't like there was an extra element because my upbringing, I would say, is maybe does fit a lot of stereotypes on how Asian American households are, but at the same
Yeah.
time, a lot of aspects it does not. Like, for example, my dad wanted me to be a musician. No one ever told me to be a doctor. No one ever told me to be like an engineer. It was always, you're going to be a pianist. Like, you're going to be a musician. And I want you to be a musician, which maybe that goes into like, being good at piano or something. But the fact that no one was pushing me to be a doctor, they also just are really lax about certain things. They
Yeah.
never, I don't know. It's just, but in other ways, they're very strict. So I didn't really like when people just impose stereotypes on me.
Yeah, I mean,
But I
it's
mean,
more of a just a listening and absorbing and then reacting accordingly.
yeah, yeah. But she was nice overall, and I did tell her that. And mainly, I didn't go to her because I felt like I was in a better place after a few sessions. So that was the main reason. And then the cultural thing was kind of a side note. And then after her, I found, I don't know if you want to go, if you want me to go through all these therapists.
You can just like skip to the sixth one. So, what do you like about the sixth one?
I like how she challenges me in the sense that she does not ever provide me reassurance. So people with OCD, they call it the doubt disorder because you're always doubting everything, you're always seeking certainty, you're seeking reassurance a lot. Seeking reassurance is actually a compulsion. Like if you think you're a bad person, you might just keep asking your friends and family, "Do you think I'm a bad person? Do you think I would ever do that?" And then it's kind of like to try to subside your anxiety, but it's only temporary. And I feel like with her, she just doesn't provide any reassurance to me, which I think is a good thing. Like it's a little annoying sometimes. I'm like, just give me what I want. I just want to be reassured that I am okay and that whatever it is. But she is really good about trying to not reinforce any kind of ongoing compulsive cycles that I'm going through.
Was she an
Um,
expert on OCD?
she's not.
Oh, okay.
So so last year was when I kind of re-sought help, and I was looking through all the OCD experts or whatever on Psychology Today, and I couldn't find many, and she was the only one who had had kind of any experience with OCD at all. Because most therapists, if you look at their bios, they don't really they focus on anxiety, depression, mood
Mm-hmm.
disorders, but they don't really, their bios don't really talk about OCD specifically or any of kind of the therapies associated with it. So I saw that her bio did include OCD, and it included ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy, which is another form of therapy that people use for OCD. And so I thought, okay, well, it's not ERP, but it's better than nothing. And I need someone right now. And because I feel like I'm going to go crazy if I can't talk to someone, because this is ruining my life right now. And so I ended up going to her, and yeah, that's how I found her. So
So, so you have intrusive thoughts. So, like, so does having a partner and anybody help you, I guess, be grounded?
yeah, yeah. So my partner Evan, he's always really been into mindfulness and meditation. He also has experienced, he's not experienced OCD, but he has experienced depressive episodes before, and like he has been in really dark places in his life. So I feel like he always tells me that meditation and it has pretty much been the thing that's gotten him out of it. That's the most useful technique for him. So he's always trying to. We literally just meditated a few hours ago because he called me and he's like, "Let's meditate." So yeah, he helps. But yeah, I mean, I try to help myself mostly because I try to remember that, I don't want to be super dependent on other people. I think it's okay to be dependent, but I think at the end of the day, you yourself, like your own person, is going to be the most helpful person to get you out
Yeah,
of
you don't
something.
want to have a. It's an unhealthy to be reliant on someone for.
Yeah, super overly reliant. Yeah. So
Yeah, so like you're in a relationship with an understanding boyfriend. Should he react normally to your intrusive thoughts? Of like, so like one of the intrusive thoughts you have is that you think you might be gay. What is a good response to react to you that you're thinking that you might be gay, for example?
Well, I'll tell you what's not, which is what he used to do. What? Actually, I don't even know. Okay, so I don't know if you, I know it sounds like you watched the SBSK
Yeah.
interview. So Evan was actually one of the people who at one point said, oh, he's like, why don't you just go experiment with some girls because like I'm tired of hearing you complain about it. And I was like, what the heck? I remember at the time, I knew he was kind of joking, but he was also kind of just like saying, yeah, you can do that. I'm fine with that. But then I remember just like, I was so frustrated and I was so upset because I was like, that is a compulsion. You don't understand OCD. That would be a compulsion for me to go and relieve the anxiety, and it would not help answer the question. Because for me, it's very much chicken and the egg. It's like the sexual intrusive thoughts are probably the thing that cause the obsessions, or is it the obsessions that cause the sexually intrusive thoughts? Like you can't really tell. Like, and when I say intrusive thoughts, I mean like trying to imagine yourself in like a sexual scenario with someone, or like literally just imagining people's genitals just randomly and being like disgusted by it and wondering yourself why you could do that. And then it's like, oh, did I imagine that because I'm attracted to that, or am I attracted to that and then that's why I imagine that? And so then it becomes this loop where you can't figure out where it started and where it ended. So I think that the most important thing when someone's describing this to you is to not suggest to them to go experiment immediately, and then I would say just say that whatever you end up being is okay, and if you never figure it out, that's also okay.
How
I
do
would
you,
say.
yeah, how do you separate like your OCD-ness of the thoughtful thoughts versus actually maybe you're actually gay or you don't know? So like, can you separate the two?
I can, because rationally I know I'm literally not gay because I am attracted to men. So it's like rationally I know this very well, and then Evan has and other people have said like, what about bi? And I'm like, in my head, when I'm deep in OCD land, bi does not even exist to me. My whole knowledge and awareness of LGBTQIA plus does not exist, and it's irrational. And it's like so weird because I know how irrational it is. In my head, it's so black and white, and it's like I need to make this decision. I need to know right now, and I don't know where that's coming from. So I think I can separate OCD thoughts usually from regular thoughts when I recognize how sudden it is, and also kind of the thought process that goes afterwards. It's a lot of rumination and kind of mentally reviewing situations and wondering like, oh, was I really attracted to this person? What, like this guy when I was 14? Like you start to think about your entire life, and you start to question everything about yourself, because the core of it is that you're having an ego dystonic thought, which just means that you're having a thought that is not aligned with who you thought you were as a person, your identity and your values and your desires. And so it's basically because of that now you're obsessing about it, because it's so contrary to who you always thought you were as a person. And I think that it is especially hard with sexual orientation OCD and relationship OCD to draw the line between those two, because a lot of people have thoughts like that, but it's just the obsessiveness, the rumination, the checking in your head, and then the intrusive thoughts, I think, is a big thing.
Yeah,
It's
it ties
complex.
into the title of your podcast of just maybe is the answer and leave it at
Yeah.
that.
I mean, yeah, maybe I'm gay. I don't know. See, this is ERP for me right now. Like, I don't even, I mean, I'm totally, it is another element I touched on in the SBSK video is I am, I would consider myself an ally. I have, this sounds a little stupid, I feel like, but I have a lot of gay friends. I have a lot of queer friends, and I love them, and I feel like the last thing I want to do is disrespect them. And then that's why there's even more guilt when I'm having these thoughts and questioning them, and I'm so horrified by them because it feels like I'm being disrespectful to their community. That's not what it is. It's more just like, it feels like an attack on my own identity. It's like if someone were to tell you, and this is irrational as well, like, you're not a human, you're a bunny rabbit. And then you're just like, no, I'm not. And then in your head, you're like, but maybe you are. And it's just this like this cycle of trying to figure out if your OCD brain is right in that you're not who you actually thought you were your entire life.
So yeah, so like you say to say maybe, but like shouldn't you hook up with a girl and then let's say you don't like it, so like now the next time you do have that thought, you could say like I definitely do not like girls because I tried it once and you have like proof now, but it's just a thought of it. Would that be helpful to you or that more damaging to you?
So I don't think there is no certainty in hooking up with girls. I would never be able to say definitely now I know, because this is what, you can do it, of course, but let's say I did it, right? Yeah. And I'm like, I didn't like that. But maybe that's because I didn't think this girl was that attractive. So let me try another girl. And then you would try another girl, okay. Right? And you're like, okay, maybe that's because we just like didn't vibe that well. And then the next one, well, maybe that's because I'm feeling guilty about my relationship. Next one, okay, well, maybe that's because I am just not attracted to girls and now I'm in a relationship. So it's like, you can always kind of turn it on its head. And if you have OCD, maybe that's a way you can confirm you have OCD. You do it and then you just keep being like, I'm not sure, I have no idea. And like, so, but you could do it. You're right. But I mean, it's not, it's probably not going to help.
I mean, I get it in your mindset. So like, I'm never going to argue with you because
I mean, it is something that people have said to me, you know, you never know until you try. But I mean, and I know it's not as severe. This is like, doing that is not as severe as saying, you know, if you, like I mentioned in the SBSK video, like if you have harm OCD, like would you say, why don't you go try out killing some people? Maybe you'd like that. You know, no one would tell you to do that. And you know, it's because the gravity of hooking up with like other people is not severe as, you know, killing people. But at the same time, it causes someone with OCD just as much distress to hear something like that, because now you're engaging with the thought in the same way that the person with OCD is. And so you're kind of fueling the obsession a little bit. But people don't really recognize that when they're doing it. So I understand.
So does someone like me a better person for you in your life, or that I am more blunt than someone that's, let's say, more empathetic? You know, this, like, do I give into your thoughts or do I kind of ground you in reality? If that
If
makes
you're more
sense.
blunt?
Yeah.
I think it depends on what the bluntness is. I mean, I think that if we were not doing this on a podcast, and let's say this was me 10 months ago when it was pervasive, like where I was having intrusive thoughts 6 to 8 hours a day, I would probably break down crying at some point during our conversation. I would be trying to defend myself. I wouldn't be able to identify what was an obsession, what was a compulsion, where this all stemmed from. I wouldn't be able to explain it. And so I would probably be really affected by what you said to me about, why don't you just go try out, you know, experimenting.
So you're saying that this stable you is relatively new in your life?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, this is the first time I feel like in my life where I've been able to identify, to really have the terminology to describe obsessions, compulsions, where they stem from, and what the difference is. Even if it's still hard to explain the difference, I feel like I'm able to with more very specific terminology now. But yeah, it has not always been this way, and it's pretty recent. So.
I mean, to me, you seem to be a really great advocate now. I would have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been trying, and I think it's because I've made so many changes in the past year, because I keep touting this self-compassion workbook for OCD, which is something people with OCD should check out if they are guilty of always self-flagellating. It's this workbook that kind of breaks down all the different common themes of OCD, and then it makes you write down your intrusive thoughts, and then it kind of makes you write down the feelings you have associated with your intrusive thoughts. So is it disgust, shame, guilt, anger, whatever? And then it kind of tries to remove all of those elements from that and just gets you to observe your thoughts from a more neutral standpoint, which is kind of the point of meditation and mindfulness too, is just observing your thoughts going by and not really engaging with them in a meaningful way unless you choose to. And it's also about choice and control. And I think when you have OCD and you're really deep in it, you think you have no control over it. You feel like it's hopeless and you have no choice but to give into your compulsions. You have no choice but to live this way for the rest of your life. And I feel like that's not completely true.
So you perfectly described the next segment I want to talk about. So you explain your OCD downward spiral as in you're in a hallway, then you're opening a door and there's no floor, so you're falling endlessly. So the question is, how do you stop falling?
How do you stop falling? I think you have to choose to stop falling. Like, you have to actively, no matter how hard it is, just really try to stop performing the compulsion. And if the compulsion is ruminating, it sounds overly simplistic, but telling yourself, I am not going to ruminate. I am not going to perform a compulsion. I actually just recently, the day that my SBSK interview was filmed, later that night, something happened that was very triggering to me. And I was about to go into about an hour or two of rumination and mental review. And I remember just actively trying to commit to the idea that I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I don't want to be in this cycle of OCD anymore. I want to be in control of my life and my thoughts and my mental health, and I am not going to engage with this rumination. And it was so hard. I was shaking. I was like crying a little bit, and I was really anxious, and I had to really force myself to just sit there in the anxiety and not do anything about it other than to just experience it. And I feel like it was really uncomfortable. You know, it felt on the verge of a panic attack, to be honest, but it wasn't. And I ended up about an hour and a half later coming out of it. And I did not, I just refused to engage in compulsions, essentially. And that's how you get out of the falling. It's more like you might still fall, but you might just have a softer landing. You're not just going to like thud down and feel really hurt and you can't get back up and do it again. You're just going to kind of end up in a better place. So.
Well, that's something I want to bring up is language and words. So what is something that Chris said that triggered you that either him or I would have no idea that triggered you? Or what is something else that wasn't Chris's fault?
It's not something that he said. It's something that happened later that night with me and Evan. We were watching a video, and something in the video really triggered me. Actually, it wasn't something in the video that triggered me. It was something that Evan said afterwards. And I mean, not to go into a lot of detail about it, but I think one of my triggers, honestly, is imagining my partner with someone else. For me, it feels as real as it happening right in front of me. And I start to feel I feel like this probably sounds, I don't know if people can relate to this, but it almost feels like it's happening in front of me and I'm being betrayed just by imagining it in my head. And it brings up a lot of feelings of past relationships too.
So you're saying, let's say he says, "Oh, this girl is cute," so you're thinking that they're in a full-blown relationship at that moment, even though you're both sitting on the couch together.
I don't even think I start to imagine them in a sexual scenario together, and then I imagine that happening over and over again, and then I start to feel betrayed because I'm imagining it and disgusted by it. And then I start to feel guilty for doing that. And then it just starts. So like that. So in the moment when it happened, I don't want to like necessarily talk about what it was because honestly, it's a whole thing, but it was something like that, like what you said. And I just I could feel myself starting to turn inward and I could just feel that I wanted to question this. I wanted to dig into this more. And I wanted to ask him all the reassurance seeking questions about what about this time and that time and that time and all the stuff. But I just didn't. I just sat there and I shook and I cried a little bit and I did not ask him any reassurance seeking questions. I didn't berate myself. And all of it was so hard because it's contrary to what I've done for so long in my life.
Does he know that he triggered you, or did you tell him that like that whatever he said wasn't good, or did you kind of just put yourself into a like I guess a bubble till you felt better, and then talked about it afterwards?
We just sat there together for half an hour, and then eventually we went on a walk. But I told him that what he said triggered me, but I didn't say that he couldn't say that because
Mm-hmm.
what he said was perfectly fine.
Yeah.
It was not even something that I disagree with. It's just something inside of me. I think it might have triggered some past relationship trauma where I was constantly lied to, and I felt like for some reason it became a whole set of questions in my head. So I didn't tell him not to say things like that anymore
Mm-hmm.
because, I don't want to censor him. In fact,
Yeah.
I could probably use a lot of what he says as ERP material for me. We joke about that sometimes, but I do tell him I feel like I'm about to spiral.
Yeah.
So I do tell him that when it starts to happen, but then I try to not spiral. So
Yeah, I mean, you want to have like a normal relationship. You don't want him to be like walking eggshells around you.
yeah. And it does still, like, I'm still working on it.
Mhm.
It's hard, but over time, yeah, I've gotten a lot better at that. So,
Yeah, be careful with your boyfriend. You know, a lot of women will see this video and want to be with him too.
oh,
But
that's okay. I mean,
no,
he's
I mean,
cute.
no, he seems a really great guy to just stay there. I think some would just be afraid to wanna like they might not be able to take you, but that's great. You guys have each other. It's hard out there, so it's nice to see good, healthy relationships too in this shitty world sometimes. So it's great to see it.
Yeah, and that was kind of why I wanted to do the SBSK interview is because
It,
I feel like, if I were me a year ago and I did not know, I was invalidating myself. I didn't know whether or not this was OCD or like me just going crazy and not wanting my relationship or what. I felt like it would have been really helpful for me to see an example of a couple that deals with it. Because you can read about it as much as you want, but it doesn't really
oh, so
touch you as
so when
much.
you made a video with Chris, you purposely wanted him to be in it to show like, hey, you can have this kind of
Yeah,
OCD, but still be in a relationship and still live normally.
yeah. Well, yeah, as normally as you can,
Yeah.
and that your partner cannot understand and actually very much misunderstand and probably trigger you, but that you can still work on it. And yeah, because I feel like when you're on, I don't know about you, but like sometimes when I'm feeling down, I go to Reddit and I used to go to OCD subreddit, the subreddit that's for OCD,
Okay.
and so much of it is just people just in pain. They're just like, oh my God, I feel helpless and all this stuff. And it's very sad. It's validating, but it's very sad. And a lot of times people will say things like, oh my God, I told my partner and now they think this about me and this and that and that. I felt like I just needed people to see a more positive example of like that it's like possible to struggle with it, but still have a supportive partner.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I think for you, the biggest thing out of all of this that you're actively trying to be a better person. You're not just like, like blaming your boyfriend for his action that he has to accommodate you and stuff. Like you're being a regular relationship, you have your problems, but you're actively trying. I think that's in itself is pretty sexy, just with the effort and all of that. So I think that's great that you had 6 therapists, that you're really actively trying to like get better and be as normal as you can.
yeah, and I mean, everyone's normal is different, right?
Hmm.
And I feel like I'm never gonna be at someone else's mental health baseline. Like I'm only
Yeah.
gonna be as good as I can get,
Hmm.
and I can only refine my mental health and my habits as much as like I can. So yeah, I don't know. I've never been, or not never, but in the past few years I've really tried to be open to being wrong and to, yeah, just seeing the unhealthy behaviors I have in myself and not just others. So
Yeah, so I didn't know this was a thing, but let's talk about themes of having OCD. So, like, I know you said you had different themes growing over time. So, like, what other themes you have? So, right now, it seems that you are dealing with relationship and sexual OCD. Like,
Sexual orientation, yeah. So there's many different themes of OCD. There's relationship OCD, there's sexual orientation OCD, harm OCD, pedophilia OCD, which just, it's probably the most controversial one.
yeah,
Um,
I didn't know that was OCD.
yeah, so really, I want to, I really don't want to misconstrue it because it's so misunderstood, and this is the reason why people with this type of OCD never talk about it.
Yeah, I
It's
remember one guy, I think, on like Reddit said that he was attracted to children, and then people were just giving him shit for it. Like he never did anything, but he just found out he was attracted to kids, and he knew it was bad. But like I don't know, it's very difficult. But I didn't know that was an actual OCD though.
So that's different than pedophilia OCD. That sounds like actual pedophilia, which is a whole other topic.
Oh, so what's
Um,
the difference then? Now I'm
so,
confused.
so pedophilia OCD is when you have unwanted sexual intrusive thoughts about children. Maybe not even sexual intrusive thoughts, just intrusive thoughts about harming children. In fact, a lot of mothers, new mothers with OCD, will have pedophilia OCD because really what OCD is, it's an overactive amygdala, right? It's part of your brain that controls like fear and anxiety. You start to see fear and anxiety in everything, right? So the thing that you don't want the most to happen is usually what your OCD will cling to. So if you're a newborn mother, for example, and you're like changing the diaper of your newborn child, you might have a sexually intrusive thought about your kid because you're changing their diapers. And you might start to freak out and think you're disgusting, you're a shameful, horrible, unfit mother or father. This can happen to fathers too. And you start to question yourself and who you are. And a lot of people will even institutionalize themselves because of this, because or they will get institutionalized by doctors or psychologists who don't understand OCD and will take these thoughts to mean that this is what they actually want to do. So OCD is basically when it's having unwanted thoughts. You don't want them. That's very different than an actual pedophile. I mean, an actual pedophile may not want the thoughts, but they might still be aroused by them. They might still desire that to happen. They might still allow that to happen and enjoy the thoughts, regardless of if they're trying to like push it away or not.
Hmm.
But someone with OCD who has these intrusive thoughts might be extremely disgusted and distressed by these thoughts and not want them, not enjoy them at all, not be aroused by them at all. But the little question in their head is what if I am? Like that's the 1%. It's like always going to be, OCD is always the doubt disorder. It's always going to come back to the what if I am? What if I'm wrong about myself? What if? So that's the difference. I hope does that clear it up at all?
I think so. So are you saying pedophilia OCD is a common theme in OCD patients?
Yeah, it's extremely common. It's an extremely common subtype
What?
because a lot of what OCD is, and especially with people who experience intrusive thoughts, people with OCD value things that. Oh, let me reframe this. OCD hangs on to stigma a lot and what's right and what's wrong. It hangs on to morality as a foundation a lot of the time. And usually people with OCD just tend to care about morality like a lot. And so what happens is that they care so much that the OCD hangs on to the thing that they care about the most / don't want to happen the most. So if you have pedophilia OCD, and I'll go back to my kind of like newborn mother example, you don't want anyone to hurt your child. You don't want yourself to hurt your child. You fear anyone harming your child in any way. And so what happens is like you start to overinterpret everything, including intrusive thoughts you might have about your child. So it's not like they want the thought, it's that they care about this value so much that now it's getting stuck in the head, and the more you try to push it away, because who wants to have intrusive thoughts like that, the more it comes back. So it's a really common theme, and it's a really misunderstood theme, and it's really debilitating for anyone who experiences it, because it's probably the most stigmatized out of any of the other themes in OCD and in just in society in general. We don't talk about pedophilia and in any kind of accepting way in society. And not saying that we should, but it's just that because it's so highly stigmatized, it's the least talked about openly by people with OCD, and it's just extremely debilitating and can cause people some really horrible suicidal thoughts as well. So,
No, I get it. Like, it's something you shouldn't think about, but it's almost not your fault. And it's like you want to, I guess, it's a very bad thing in itself. And I get that. So I can understand why someone would not want to talk about it, especially publicly, just to chat about it. So it's crazy that I didn't think that was a thing at all. I just knew like pedophilia, like R. Kelly exists, but I didn't know there was like an OCD to it. And like, it's just, I feel like when you were talking about the mother of having pedophilia OCD, that she seemed that not only she's afraid of the world, but she's also afraid of herself too, because she
yeah,
can escape herself, or she can like defend, I guess, her environment, which is
right,
scary.
right. And, again, just to be clear, like pedophilia and pedophilia OCD are really different things. Honestly, maybe the OCD elders or whatever should rename pedophilia OCD, because it's not, maybe it's unclear, but it's not that you're enjoying your thoughts or that you're attracted to children or that you want to harm children. It's that you fear that you will, and you are disgusted by your thoughts, and you hate, you don't want your thoughts. And then that's why you fixate over if it even flickers in your mind, even if the idea comes up in your mind that it's even possible for you to do that. That's what catches with someone with OCD, with that theme of OCD. So it's not, it deserves to be treated with compassion, just like any other theme of OCD. It just so happens that people like Steven Crowder and other internet people misinterpret what it is, and then they kind of push those folks into even darker places because they're not accepting and they don't understand the how OCD functions. So.
Yeah. I think one would help is like you mentioned, like a name change, because it's very like extreme, and no one would ever want to be called out. But
Right.
it just seems to me, it seems kind of like a tumor of the brain in a way. Like
Hmm.
it's just there all the time, and you kind of can't get rid of it. But you have to deal with it, and it breaks my heart that people think this way, not because they want to, and like they're trying so hard to not have those thoughts at all, but like they can. Like you mentioned, like earlier in the podcast, of like if you tell someone not to think of something, they're gonna think of it, and like it must be so hard. Like I don't know, but just talking to you is like it would be so hard for just to get rid of this thought completely. But like
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier, like you had themes throughout your life, and so like now you're in a relationship OCD and sexual orientation OCD. So like how long did these themes last for you then?
That's a good question. They usually last anywhere from, I guess, 2 to 8 months.
Oh really? Oh,
um,
that's it. Oh, okay. I was
but
thinking like years.
well,
Or
so it can kind of like subside after a few months, right? And then it starts to happen again when a new, I feel like it kind of comes with change, right, in your life. Every time you experience something new, maybe something will trigger it again, and it'll come back
That's what
up.
I was thinking. I was thinking more of like an environment. So like if you weren't in a relationship now, or like let's say you never found Evan, you may not have the sexual orientation OCD and relationship OCD. You may have, I don't know, something else. That
Oh yeah, before any of this happened, I had an obsession with something going into my ear. It was super
okay,
random.
okay. That's that,
Like it's just it doesn't, and like that's the thing is too, is like, most of the time OCD hangs on to things that you care about the most, but like I don't really care about, I mean, I care about my ears, but like I don't really
I
know
know, but like
why.
why did your brain decide to choose like your ear out of all places?
I think it's because it's just a perfect concoction of anxiety and stillness. I think people with OCD struggle with stillness. And so this happened in particular when I was coming back from visiting my sister in New York, and I was on the Amtrak, and I remember just laying there like I was trying to go to sleep, and all of a sudden I had this intrusive thought of something going into my ear, and then being like, oh my God, what? And then like I had to lay the other way because then I was thinking about it going in that ear. And I think it's partly I was already anxious about something else happening in my life, and I was like on a train ride that would take however many hours, and it was stillness, right? It was boredom. So
Yeah.
I feel like when, it's also, I think, kind of I mean, this is a little bit different than OCD, but I think generally I've heard that you can have a trauma response that happens sometimes is when you have experienced a lot of trauma or you have a lot of instability in your life. When you do have some stability, your body and your mind is finally in a place to process all that, and then it kind of just overfloods, and now it's all coming at the same time. So for me, I think before I met Evan and like our relationship, I had just moved into like my apartment, and I had just ended a 6-year relationship that was very tumultuous, and there was a lot of change that I had to deal with. And I think finally when I found some sense of stability is when all of it started coming back, and I had to deal with all the processing, and I think that triggered some obsessions as well. So
Okay. I hope you have like a obsession of like getting money or something, like something like positive,
yeah.
Like it always seems to
Oh
be like
yeah.
something
No.
negative.
Sometimes I obsess over really interesting things like kangaroos. Like I remember one time I saw this kangaroo documentary at a bar. It was just like on the screen, and then I started Googling kangaroos for a week, which
Okay.
I thought was super cute. They're really cute. So
Mm,
yes, I have positive obsessions sometimes. I
okay.
used to be obsessed with fitness as well, so like I think that's kind of positive. But yeah, not
Okay.
always negative.
Wow. Okay. I'm learning so much about OCD today.
Yeah, it's a lot. I know it's like hard to take in and understand fully if you don't have it. So
No, I mean I appreciate the conversation, is chatting about it. I always like to
yeah,
come. I always like to be the host of the person that's like interested in it and like actually want to know the person and kind of acting like a normal person. I don't want to act like a professional because my audience are kind of just regular people too. So I kind of like want to be that regular person to talk to you about it. 'Cause I feel like some of the
yeah,
questions I ask will be like questions they want to ask too.
yeah, yeah. That's true. Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's a good kind of role play, I guess, for how
Yeah.
how these conversations should play out in real life with
Yeah,
other
but I
people
mean,
that
I
are
also don't
listening.
want to be like the annoying person where like like I dealt with like a lot of it in my life, so I don't want to ask this exact same question everyone else asks too. So I try to be a little different, So I was on her podcast and she asked me how I treat myself with kindness, and I said showers. So how do you treat yourself with kind? How do you show yourself with kindness?
Yeah, I just try not to berate myself, I'd say. I try not to stick too long to a thought in my head where maybe I'm like, did I say something wrong? Or like, did I do something wrong? I think it's just about being mindful about what my thought patterns are like and trying to not overly berate myself about things that are going on.
So before I take the mic away from you, are there anything you want to say, promote any words of wisdom? The mic is all yours.
Yeah, if you have OCD, you're not alone. I think that there are lots of resources out there. There's NoCD, which is kind of an OCD specific app slash company that does ERP. There's Psychology Today, where you can find OCD therapists. Made of Millions is a good resource. And yeah, you're not alone. And I understand. And I feel like, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So,
Okay, so thank you so much, Erica, for listening. I mean, not listening, for chatting with me. Thank you for giving me your time. You can find Erica in the description below, and you can listen to our podcast called Just Say Maybe. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching, and I'll catch everyone next time. Bye.
bye.